Welcome back. Danielle Knapp here with Astrotherapy. I am a licensed professional counselor, therapist, and also a certified astrologer. And in this space, we work with the planets as mirrors and archetypal energies as a trailhead into our internal world and landscape, noticing different planets representing different parts of ourselves and allowing that to guide us, help us, and support us in our introspective deep dives to know ourselves better. Okay, well, here we are, 10th month. I can't believe it. We are already in October. Wow, time is moving so quickly. And I talked last month a lot about, we had the eclipse wormhole happening last month. It was a very intense month energetically. I'm coming off a really hot summer. So here we are moving into October, and the energy does feel different, but probably still intense because that's just kind of the overarching theme of 2025 and 2026, for sure the first half of 2026. Just with things speeding up, the intensity, the things coming to light. We've still got the outer planets in the conversation in the office, they're revealing truths. There's so much happening globally, collectively, with these outer planets that are very far away and affect us all as a group, that we're going to continue to feel that, because that formation, they move so slowly. It's just working us for a while longer. So in October, I was really noticing the influx of water. So we have a lot more water coming in this month, which, when we're talking about the element of water, we're talking about emotions. We're talking about feelings. We're talking about the way that we have experience outside of language. The whole idea of, like, why do we have poetry? Why do we have music? Because it adds extra feeling to the words, and there's a whole different experience that happens in our bodies. So when we think of water, and the reason there is more water is, one, we've got good old Jupiter, who's doing a lot this month. He is in Cancer still, but he's coming into the later degrees of Cancer. So he is starting some geometry that lasts a long time with Chiron, and he's also creating some grand water trines as planets move through some of the other he's doing T-squares and trines. So we have the Cancer energy, which is like the rushing river of emotions. But then we also are going to be starting Scorpio season this month on the 22nd. So Scorpio is fixed water. This is like the iceberg. You can see the very tip and what's visible, but there's so much under the surface. And there's a real kind of mysterious kind of, you're not able to use your eyes the same that you would maybe to be able to see things. There's more of that, okay, how do we sense stuff when we don't have our vision available? And that's the Scorpio energy. And then we have Saturn hanging out in the late degrees of Pisces. And this month, Neptune will be scooting back into Pisces as well. So those are the three water signs, and they are activated in different ways this month. So we'll go deeper into that in a little bit. We have our full moon in Aries. So this is a fire full moon happening at 14 degrees of Aries on the 6th of October. And when we are doing a full moon, as a reminder, moon is directly across from the sun. And so the sun is over in Libra, because we're in Libra season. And this is a relational axis, okay? And the moon is let's say, the unconscious, and here's the sun shining brightly, illuminating what is hidden within ourselves. And when we're talking about the Libra Aries or Aries Libra axes, we're talking about the war and peace axes. Aries is the me, Libra is the we. We can see if we swing too far on either side of that spectrum, relationship is not sustainable. If we're too over obsessed with the me, then there's no room for the other. And if we're too over enmeshed and codependent in the we, and we're like this, there's no space for relationship, because relationship can only happen in the space between two things. So once we fully enmesh, that's also not a sustainable place to be. So, we've been working with the Aries Libra axis for a while, because if you remember, the nodes of fate that's where they were before they moved into Pisces and Virgo axes. And so this has been coming up a lot. And we had our, not this year, but previous year eclipse seasons were in the Aries Libra axes. And there was a lot of upheaval, a lot of war and peace kind of battling going on. So we've got that moon happening. And on that same day, we have Mercury moving into Scorpio. And then the other moon that we have is the new moon, and that is going to be in Libra at 28 degrees. So this is new because we had the 2 new moons in Virgo last month. So now we're having our full moon before we have our new moon, which is very interesting. It's kind of a reverse way to do this. Typically it's like, oh, we've got the new moon. We're going to set our intentions in the dark of the night because the moon and sun are on top of each other. So you can't see the moon in the sky. And we're thinking, okay, we're planting the seeds. And then by the time the full moon comes 2 weeks later, we're seeing what's growing and we're deciding, is this working or not? What do I need to adjust? What do I need to pull out? What do I need to trim? And what do I want to pivot from? Like, it doesn't seem like it's in service anymore. Now we're doing the full moon before we do the new moon. So there's this reversal of energy, and that can feel a little disruptive, maybe if we've gotten into the rhythm of the way things were flowing before. I mean, this happens. This is a regular cycle that we go through, but it does seem to do something different. Like, it's like we're getting access to the subconscious through illumination before we go into intention setting, which is kind of beautiful in its own way. It's like, okay, I can see into, into my subconscious, into the basement. I've turned the lights on. I can see everything. And now I'm going to set it up so that when I arrive at the place of setting intentions, I have all this information guiding me there. So I just wanted to bring up that point because I think it's interesting. It's always interesting when it flips and noticing, oh, is that something that you feel within your own body or not? So back to Jupiter, back to the water. Let's start there. So Jupiter is going to be activating a square with Chiron. And this square is going to last, I believe, through January 2026 because Chiron moves very slow and Jupiter is going to be doing his retrograde in Cancer. So what does this mean? A square is agitation. It's a pressure, it's a tension. It calls for action of some sort. And when we think about Jupiter, we're thinking about growth, expansion, optimism, generosity, higher perspective. And when Jupiter is making squares, it's different than, like, say, Saturn or Mars creating a square. Jupiter's called the greater benefit. So there's a really benevolent type of vibe to Jupiter generally. Pop astrology takes it really far, and it's like, oh, Jupiter's all blessing and abundance, and anytime a Jupiter transit is happening, it's just wonderful and it's lovely and it's all the things you wish for and all your dreams come true, which, yeah, maybe. And also, what Jupiter really does is he expands everything that he comes in contact with. So he can expand your generosity, or he can expand your righteousness. He can expand your different behaviors that you're trying to, like, decrease maybe in your life. You can make those come forward in a bigger way, all in service of our growth, right? So let's see. So when we think about, we've got Jupiter, who's very growth oriented. He's in Cancer, which means he is thinking of the past, thinking of your childhood. He's thinking of home. He's thinking of, like, what it means to feel emotionally safe within yourself. The crab carries his home on his back and he has that hard shell. But what is he protecting? The most tender of flesh, right? So when Jupiter is in Cancer, there is a real sensitivity to that planet that maybe wouldn't show up the same in an earth sign or a fire sign. There's more room for those feelings, sometimes bigger feelings. Cancer I've described as a rushing river. It's like it's initiatory. It's like getting things going, and it's like the churning, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot coming through. So Jupiter over in Cancer, creating a square, an agitation to Chiron in Aries. Okay. So Chiron in Aries, this has been happening for a long time. this is something you've been working on. This is a wound, a core wound, or something that's just getting like, it's like picking a scab. It will not heal. It just, you keep messing with it, or the planets keep stirring it up, agitating it, so that you can really know every aspect, to really feel it and see it and integrate this core wounding. Some say that your Chiron wound never goes away, that it's something that you carry with you your entire life. But through your journeying with this wound, you learn so much about healing, and then you offer those practices to others, which is beautiful for probably some parts. Like, oh, what a beautiful way to be in service. Also, maybe a little overwhelming to other parts of like, what do you mean I can never heal this? So, take it if it feels resonant. It's interesting. The thing that stands out to me about Chiron right now is this conjunction with an asteroid called Eris. And Eris moves really slow. She is not an asteroid that I have talked about before, I don't believe, on here. Simply, or really, like, real quickly, she's considered like the uninvited feminine. There's a lot of conflict, strife, betrayal. Let's see what else. There's just like confrontation, like something really confronting about Eris being conjunct, so right with Chiron. So she's adding in that kind of maybe conflict feeling that comes already on top of your wound, like confront, your wounds are being confronted by Eris. And then we have Jupiter showing up and saying, let's blow it up, make it real big so that you can see this and know this, so that you can work with this. So you can see it from a higher perspective. That's always the goal, right? Transcending, being able to be our own emotional alchemist, to transmute our pain into treasure. So that opens up, and that's happening, like I said, for months. We will have that aspect going on. And so then there's something called a T-square that begins to activate. So we have this square happening between Jupiter and Chiron / Eris, and that's between Cancer and Aries. Well, then we have a lot of stuff happening down here in Libra. And as we talked about with the full moon, Libra is directly across from Aries. So this is also going to create a square. Here we are in geometry class, right? We have 180 across from each other. We have a 90-degree square here and a 90-degree square here, making a big red triangle on the chart. And there's a couple of these this month. So the first one begins with Mercury. Mercury will be in opposition to Chiron while also squaring Jupiter. And let me see, do I have that day written down? It's going to be in the first week. It's in this first week right now. And so Mercury is the mind, right? So this is how we're processing. So this can be a really aha type of moment due to agitation and pressure and things stirring your dust, so to speak, so you can see what's underneath it. And possibly a new way of thinking about something, truths being revealed, more information coming in that's helping you integrate or conceptualize whatever is happening with this wound that you've been working on. Of course, if you have any planets that are from the 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 degrees of the cardinal signs, so that's going to be Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries, you're going to be feeling this extra personally. Collectively, we're all experiencing this. And then when we add in one of our own planets, if you're familiar with that, if not, book a reading with me. We can look at what's going on and you can understand your own blueprint so you can really apply these transits as you work with yourself and your life and your plans and your knowing and your celebration of who you are and who you came here to be. So we have that big red square happening. We've got the mind showing up going, okay, we're going to learn more about whatever it is that we've been working on, with this Eris Chiron situation up in Aries. So then, moves on. We have our full moon happening. And then we scoot on over to Mercury scoots into Scorpio, fixed water. So once he is in Scorpio, where Mars is right now, which has added a lot of intensity at the end of September, it will be making immediately a square with Pluto. So it goes from having this T-square, the big red triangle opposing Chiron, but getting, having that square with Jupiter, to moving into Scorpio, where he will then square Hades, Lord of the Underworld, Pluto over in Aquarius. And this is all about getting to the bottom of things, getting into the roots of finding out what's happening in the dark and going very, very deep. Scorpio, when we think about Scorpio, we think about going into the dark. Scorpio is a very serious, somber kind of energy. And there's oftentimes, it runs so deep that Scorpio planets will sometimes just like go mute because they don't, like, language fails them. So it's interesting when Mercury hops into Scorpio, because Scorpio exists deeper than language can go. And so that is something that can sometimes be challenging for Mercury, since he is all about the logos and how we're thinking about things and processing through information, kind of more in that left leaning place, whereas Scorpio is all in the feeling body over there. So once in Scorpio, square with Pluto, Mercury is going to continue on till he gets towards the end of Scorpio, because he will actually be moving into Sagittarius on the 29th of October. So he moves all the way through Scorpio this month, moving very fast. So as he gets to the end, he creates this grand water trine with Jupiter and Saturn. And so there's this lovely, water trine happening, which is all about the feeling body and how we're working with our emotions. And so this is where I think about the concept of vesseling. And I've been reading about this. I first heard about it in Francis Weller's book, Soul Work for Uncertain Times. But when we think about water, and we think about how water takes the shape of whatever vessel that you put it into. And so if we're going to, and we imagine this, work with the metaphors with me on this, see if it feels helpful. When the alchemists of our past began this journey and adventuring to create the sorcerer's stone, to turn lead into gold, they started writing down their work. And there was an incredible emphasis and list of stipulations necessary for the container or the vessel for which you would have these processes. And the first rule was that the vessel be clear, that you could see into it, so you could watch the progress and process happening within. So there had to be clear sight into the vessel. The second requirement of the vessel was strength, that this had to be a container, a vessel that could endure and hold through heat and pressure and vapors. Because if the container breaks or crumbles due to the intensity of the process, the whole thing is lost, right? It's a moot point. Like all is wasted at that, especially if you're like months into something and then it cracks and then we have to just scrap it. And then the last requirement of the vessel was a seal over the top, a thick wax seal. And this was a boundary to prevent external contaminants coming in and interrupting the process. But it also had the duty of holding the process within until it was ready to come out. So we wouldn't want it to prematurely be released and not be able to move through the entire transmutation. And so, as Jung would say, the alchemists were working with materials as a projection of their emotional processing. And I think there's something so beautiful about that when we think about ourselves as vessels. And do we have clear sight into the vessel? Can we see, do we know ourselves, that we can be aware of when there's a process happening and we can observe it and we can trust the process and we can hold the space for that, holding space for ourselves, right, as the vessel. And then the second piece is the strength. How do you fortify your vessel? And this goes back into what I mentioned at the beginning of this recording around a personal practice. What are you doing to continue to strengthen and fortify yourself, to ground yourself, to call on a spiritual practice or the light if that feels resonant for you? How are you working with creating strength to endure the process? Because who knows how long it's going to take. Some processes and transmutations are really quick. You hold the space and you're moving on really quickly. Some take longer, and we don't know when processes complete or move into the next phase. We just have to trust the process. Again, clear sight to be able to observe what is happening within ourselves and to notice the shifts and changes, even if they're super subtle. The third one about the seal. So this is a boundary, right? Like, we do not want to have everyone else's thoughts and opinions and ideas coming into our process. It will contaminate our own transmutation. And so again, this is where that personal, individual practice comes in. What you are doing in stillness with yourself. Again, groups and communities, amazing. We all need them. It's a vital need for us as human beings that we have people around us. And I love gathering and I love ritual with other people. And we need to be doing our own individual work alongside of that. So the seal, the boundary of it, but it also, as mentioned, that allows it to not be released prematurely. It allows it to not go cold. This might be more of a private, personal process that you're not sharing, that you're not prematurely exposing because it's not ready yet. It's not ready to come out because it's still working its way through. And this might be, personal practice can be therapy where you're having a really unique relationship with a professional where the focus is all on you and your processing. And the therapist is helping you fortify your vessel by modeling what holding space looks like, right? We know that the therapist does not heal you. The therapist holds space so that you can heal yourself within that space. That is what a therapist hopefully is doing, or any healer or anybody who is able to hold space for others, is so that we can exist in that space and feel outside of judgment and the freedom to be in our authentic knowing and experiencing to access some of these buried parts within ourselves. So vesseling can be really interesting, something to noodle on, explore that, see if it's something that feels helpful. It does for me when I'm thinking about processes like grief, something that doesn't really complete. Like, grief is something that shows up and it stays with you. And grief, which is, did we talk about this last time? Grief and gravity, which makes me think of Scorpio and the deepest of the deep. We know water trying to settle at the deepest point possible, and that's because of gravity. Grief, gravitas, gravity, they all have the same root word, which means heavy, which means there's a weight to it. And so when we're in processes that we are not generative in energy, they're more exhausting, there can be a desire to kind of lift out, or maybe to prematurely eject out of the grief or the depression that's visiting, that's slowing things down, that's cocooning you. And I really love this idea of like, what if we release focus on the process that's happening and instead we turn our attention to strengthening our vessels? We just need to take care of the vessel, and the process is going to happen internally, emotionally, if we can hold that space, if we can have the strength, the fortitude, and the ability to endure however long the process might take. So, okay, I kind of went all over the place with that. So back to the astrology. And so we also have Jupiter, who is going to be on the 8th, will be making a sextile with Venus. And so this is a really lovely transit that is very supportive. So the sextile is happening right after Venus is conjunct the South Node. We have a repeating story here. So when Venus joins the South Node in Virgo, there is again clearing out. She is clearing things out. She is completing karma. She's saying, we're done with that, moving on. And then after she clears that out, she moves into the similar geometry of opposing Chiron and Eris up there, with the square then at that point to Jupiter. But first she gets a really nice kind of boost of energy and support. She's the lesser benefic and Jupiter is the greater benefic. So they both have a really benevolent, kind, supportive energy typically that we can work with. So, but she will, when she is opposing Chiron, she will be back in rulership because she rules Libra, which just kind of gives her a little bit more self authority in that space. Okay, so on the 13th, Venus moves into Libra. This is also when Pluto stations direct. Pluto, all three of the outer planets have been in retrograde. Pluto will be going direct, which is, again, they're so far away that I don't know that we necessarily feel them personally in our bodies when they're going retrograde or going direct, because Pluto spends like half the year in retrograde. So it's not a wild thing like Mercury, where he's like scooting along, turns around, goes backwards, then moves forward again. Pluto is a little different. We're just working with a couple degrees, in each zodiac sign because he's moving so slowly. So, but when they station, there is a pause. And sometimes that is something that we feel. And we can watch on the global scale and, if something, whatever is happening then with Pluto kind of going, okay, time to get moving again, time to be looking forward. What are we doing with the death and rebirth process that we just moved through? How is the power and control situation going? Are truths being revealed? All of that. So we will see. We will see how that goes on the 13th. And so let's see, there's also a kite that forms on that day with the moon, which is really interesting. And this is between the nodes of fate, and a kite is going to be a blue triangle, a trine, and then a little triangle on top of that. And so we have the tip of the kite and the tail of the kite, and those are going to be the nodes of fate. And as a reminder, the nodes are in Pisces and Virgo. And then the other 2 points that are making the kite shape are going to be Mars and the moon in Jupiter conjunct over in Cancer. So we'll have some water and earth, which just feels a little stabilizing. Like again, while we have the fire and air moons, all this water coming in, like this water trine, that happens with Mercury, is also going to happen with Mars and is also going to happen with Venus by the time she gets there. So it's really a theme we're going to be working on for a while. So there's that influx of water coming in. Okay, let's see what else is happening for us to look at. Okay, well, we start Scorpio season on the 22nd when the sun moves into Scorpio. So then the sun will, because everybody who moves into Scorpio, that's first degrees, will be making a square with Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, that little check-in that happens. But this time, Pluto will be direct. On the same day, Neptune slides back into Pisces. So we're going to be seeing how that feels. Neptune kind of makes things a little blurry, a little confusing, a little foggy. Neptune is also high level spirituality. Venus is like human heart. Neptune is like Christ consciousness, unconditional love, and forgiveness and compassion. And so him moving back into Pisces is more comfortable than Neptune in Aries, which is kind of the warrior energy. Pisces is more of that kind of flowy, sacred surrender, real swirly. Again, Neptune is the modern day ruler of Pisces, so a lot of compatibility between that zodiac and that planet. All right. Okay. So yes, we have that grand water trine happening on the 24th. First with Mercury 24th through the 26th. And then it will be with Mars into November, which we'll talk more about that in November. And then we have Mercury moving into Sagittarius on the 29th. So that's really hitting on the main themes. So the things that really stand out to me this month are the influx of water, which is why I brought in the concept of vesseling. How do we hold ourselves through? How do we allow ourselves to be expanded by Jupiter and also fortified and strengthened as we hold things coming at us at light speed? That it's really, really fast right now. And the other thing that happens with water too is some psychic, the psychic abilities, because this is sensing and knowing outside of eyes and words. And so when we think about that, there could be more of those gifts coming online for a lot of people. And, this ability to just remember that, what we're doing within is going to impact what's happening around us. And vice versa. So if we can allow the external to be our guidance to come into our internal landscape, allowing the triggers and the division and the activation that we're feeling from what's happening outside of us. And if there's another person who's triggering us, or there is a system or government that is triggering us, can we use that material to turn the focus within and to come back into ourselves, to recognize our own aspects of self that mirror that circumstance that's happening outside of ourselves, which is extremely confronting. This is not for the, I was going to say weak of heart. Is that even a phrase? Weak of mind. This is not for the weak. Like, it's very confronting to recognize the parts of ourselves that we bury, parts of ourselves that we don't want to see, the parts of ourselves that could cause harm, that we all have the capacity to cause harm. But the more that we recognize those parts within ourselves, and the more we meet that with curiosity and compassion, the more integrated that becomes. And honestly, then the less influence and power that those parts have over us. It's when they're buried in the shadow that all of a sudden, we're doing something very unconscious. And, this would be like cognitive dissonance, or this is why we'll see people in positions of power preaching one thing and then doing the exact opposite, or being accused, being found guilty of the exact thing they're preaching against. Righteousness and splitting often give more power to whatever it is that we're repressing. So the more we can confront ourselves with our own messiness, with our own parts who can cause harm, if there's someone who is irritating you or who is annoying, noticing our own irritating, annoying parts. Like, this is the work. This is how we continually transmute and expand ourselves and our atmosphere to be able to hold so much. And that's what's being needed right now. Like, we need to be able to hold a lot. Again, back to the vessel. We need that vessel to be strong, but also have quite the capacity to hold, because our nervous systems are going to continue to do this. Up and down, up and down, up and down, which is fine. A healthy nervous system reacts to its environment. We're not here to be zenned out, calm, cool all the time. Like, that is not the goal. And I think that there's probably some functional dissociation going on if that is what is happening. An appropriate nervous system is going to go, what? When they see something extreme out there in the world. But can we have a big enough atmosphere that we can still hold on to our true essence? And something I'd love to remind myself and others about is sometimes we get this idea that whatever our flash in the pan emotions are, that's who we are. Well, that's me. Like, oh, that person cut me off and I wanted to, like, I don't know, flick them off or honk my horn. I'm so angry. I want to, like, whatever. And we think, oh, that's who I am. Oh my gosh, I'm so reactive. I'm so rageful. That's not who we are. What we actually do with that flash in the pan emotion, that's who you truly are. Do you feel that rage and then go, oh, feeling some rage? And I'm going to be conscious of what I do with that. And I can still be clear-minded while that rage is unfolding inside of me. That's an expanded atmosphere. That's capacity. That's the goal. And that's who you are. Your true essence is the one that can watch that. Those knee-jerk reactions, sometimes we can feel a lot of shame around that, around like whatever comes up first. Oh, that must be who I am. And I don't like that. But what that is the reaction. That's the very young parts of your brain, the back of your brain. The survival threat responses that we feel in our bodies, in our animal bodies, honestly. And then depending on how safe or unsafe we felt as children is going to really influence the rate at which we react. But again, if you have any shame about any of that comes up, that's not your true self. Your true self is the one that watches that and decides what you do with it. Okay, let's see. I think that covers it. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll be wishing you lots of strength, lots of fortification in your bodies. And I am sending you many blessings today and always.